Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of Podcastaway. Podcastaway is a show where I ask someone to talk about 9 pieces of electronic media that they will be stranded with. The 9 pieces of media can include films, TV shows, and computer games. The guest also gets to pick one book and one luxury item, and through their choices we get to know them just a little bit better. Our guest can also pick the isolation scenario in which they find themselves. So far, Lex picked a Mars colony where he was the only remaining crewmate, and Jasmine Hodge chose a bunker in some sort of post-apocalyptic setting. Today's guest is Chantelle.
Hello.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and your podcast as well.
I'm Chantelle. I created and host Lady Justice True Crime, which is basically what it says on the tin. So it focuses on UK-based crimes, both past and present. So there's a bit of historical ones, there's some more modern ones. That's just about it, really.
How did you first get into podcasting?
So I actually have a drama degree, but I stopped doing anything to do with performing a few years ago. And I had the itch about 2 years ago, but completely chickened out. And back in October last year, I was just like, oh, I should just do it. So I panicked, I wrote an episode and I just shoved it on. And it was terrible, but it's there and it started me and I'm grateful for it.
I think it's a legal requirement that every first episode of every podcast has to be terrible. I know ours is. I've listened back to it recently, and the audio for a start is just night and day to what we do now. I'm sure it's absolutely fantastic, and you definitely are one of those lucky people that you have the voice of a storyteller. It's very soothing, very calming, even though a lot of the content that you talk about is anything but. I was just going to ask you, how do you choose the cases that you talk about on your podcast?
So I do a lot of research. Each episode has about at least 25 hours. There's some bigger ones that are coming that I've already done over 100 hours, and
Wow.
I haven't even started to write it. So I would generally just find stuff. I would be going through the old newspaper archives, and then I'll just find one that really kind of strikes me. And I tend to look more at the victim and who they were and who loved them and what were their favourite colours and cereal and very strange things, because people are not just, they lit up a room. They're a collection of very different things, and then this tragedy happens and most people only really remember the perpetrator of a crime.
Okay, Chantelle, let's start by talking about your setting for your period of isolation.
So I am in a crypt in the Glasgow necropolis because, well, it's just a giant gravesite with 50,000 dead people I can talk to.
Fair
No
enough.
one's going to judge me there.
That's very good logic. Yeah, I like that. Okay, let's start with your first piece of electronic media. What have you got for us?
It's HBO's Oz.
Oz. Now, of all of your choices, this is the only one that I have absolutely zero knowledge of. So tell me and tell the people at home what Oz is.
So Oz is set in a prison. It's set in the Oswald State Correctional Facility in the US. And basically there's this experimental kind of unit, and there's a mix of so many different characters, and basically it's day-to-day prison life. It's incredibly brutal. Sometimes it's very, very hard to watch. But it has all these elements from theatre. So there's some Shakespeare in it. There's one guy that believes that, he has spoken to God. There's people that are innocent, and it's just this very dynamic, and it's very human. It's the I can't even explain how profound it is as just a human TV show.
You talked about Shakespeare in this, and you've obviously alluded to the fact that you were in acting. I feel like I want to talk about your acting. What were you doing, and kind of what levels were you doing it at?
So I was professional for some time. I've done TV, film, radio, but theatre is my love. Comedy is my first love. So I've done quite a bit of stuff. I've been on some TV shows. I have a stage name, and I don't really refer to it anymore because it's not such a big part of my life anymore. But, in the future it might be, but for now it's just not.
That's really interesting. I mean, I'm intrigued as all hell, but I'll allow you to keep your stage name a secret. What is it about studying the human condition that appeals to you? Is it something that you learned to do when you were in your acting, kind of people watching, studying, people's movements, what they were saying? Is that kind of maybe what your appeal is towards Oz?
Yeah, kind of. It's also, it links in with true crime for me, because these people that are locked in this experimental unit, the point of the unit is set up by this guy called McManus, and he wants to see if he can rehabilitate these people. It shows that you can't, that some people are just inherently bad. They show this, they have another guy that takes over the unit, and all hell breaks loose. So this kind of wanting to explore what makes us good or bad, or even when we are bad, how we connect to people that are good or bad as well. Because at the end of the day, as humans, we depend on relationships, and there's a certain chemistry in them.
How does it make you feel when you watch it?
It's relatable, because every human, even myself, I've got good days, I've got bad days, I've got days where I struggle with my mental health. I have days where I'm not a very nice person, especially before coffee. But I have this feeling when I watch it that it makes me feel that no matter what side of me is at that time showing, that's fine, it's normal. And the show can make you laugh and it can make you cry. There is a point where one of the main characters gets put to death, and he doesn't deserve to be put to death. And you just feel for him. Though, yes, he did kill someone and he has these problems, he wasn't an inherently bad person. So it just makes you want to reach out to others.
Okay, let's move on to your second piece of electronic media. What have you got next?
Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Great choice. What were you doing in your life when you first discovered Buffy the Vampire Slayer?
I was in primary school, and I remember I used to run home from school, and it was on like BBC Two, this like edited version, and I loved running home and watching it. It's kind of like soft horror, and I remember thinking, oh yeah, I'm so grown up now.
I remember watching it on BBC Two as well, actually. So yeah, that's bringing back some memories for me as well.
I was just going to say, it was just one of those highlights that you could just run home.
Yeah.
Make sure you get there in time.
Again, how did it kind of make you feel? Because if you were in primary school, did you find it scary, or was it kind of beyond that? You said it was also something that potentially could make you laugh as well.
For a lot of my childhood, I was very much the outsider. I was always, because the music I listened to was very different to all my friends. They'd be all listening to things like Spice Girls and Steps, and I'd just be there with a Black Sabbath album, just rocking out in the corner on my own. So Buffy for me was just kind of like, this is my place, and it introduced me to a lot of the stuff that like Joss Whedon's done, and the whole like culture of horror, which is very accepting. So even as a very little kid, it came out in '97, so I was about 6 when it came out. So I kind of grew up watching it, and I remember I didn't actually watch the last series until last year, because I couldn't bring myself to end it for myself. I just kind of left the last series because I didn't want to see it end.
Yeah, I can completely relate to that. I think I've got one or two TV shows I can think of where I've either refused to watch the next season because of how good a particular season was, or just not wanting there to be anything, this kind of finite ending. Because sometimes things don't live up to your expectations. They don't end the way you want them to.
You love these characters. You love how, like, Sander is this goofy guy that doesn't have any special abilities, but he's integral to the group. And then not wanting to see how he was going to face up to the end of the world.
Yeah. And you talk about genre horror. Is this, again, like a TV show? You saw it in your formative years. Did this send you down that path in terms of, films, TV, games?
I remember when I was very little, there was a lot of horror VHSs in our dining room. So I remember always looking at the covers thinking, oh, that's just, that's dark and that's interesting and that's different. And I think I've always wanted to be a little bit different. I didn't want to be like the sunny kind of happy kid, apparently. I'm pretty sure I got my first black nail polish when I was about 6 as well. So
Really? Wow, that is
yeah.
interesting. Yeah. And where were you based at the time? Because you told me, off air that you've moved around quite a lot.
At the time, I was living in Suffolk, and I spent a lot of time in Suffolk. Even when we moved about, Suffolk was like our base. It's where we used to go.
Were there any particular episodes, if you had to kind of sell Buffy the Vampire Slayer to somebody that maybe liked the genre but hadn't gone for Buffy the Vampire Slayer for whatever reason, maybe an episode or season or a particular saga they went through that might sell them on the TV show?
For the horror aspect of it, possibly, going through to, I can't remember what they're called now, The Gentleman. It was an entire episode that's completely silent.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's completely silent. The gentlemen come through and they look absolutely terrifying. They're kind of like the silence from Doctor Who.
That's exactly what I was just thinking when you said that.
So they come through and they steal everybody's voices. So any dialogue that needs to be said in the episode is written on like whiteboards. But it's an entire episode based on reaction. And it is terrifying. And they kind of like hover through. And I remember when I saw the silence on Doctor Who, I was like, "No, blatant rip-off." So I think if anybody hadn't watched it, to start with that episode, just to get a feel of how horror works in the show. Because, yeah, there's lots of vampires and poof, and a lot of TV shows have kind of spoofed that. But the vampires in Buffy are particularly good because the way that they look as well is just so iconic.
Is it Spike? Is that one of them?
Oh, yes, Spike.
Yeah, that was a look. The kind of
Spike.
bleached blonde British like vampire guy. Just like, he always cracked me up.
He's like my dreamboat. Perfect man.
Yeah.
Complete, utter, terrible person, but has this punkish side that, can be good when he needs to be.
It's a really great look. And I remember one episode, and I'm not really anywhere close to being a Buffy super fan, but I remember there's this episode where I think they all collectively lose their memories, and
Yes.
they all come back, and he's talking to Giles. He's like, "You're British," and then he's like, he goes through this vocabulary of British words, and he's like, something, knickers. Oh God, I'm British as well.
Yeah.
I just remember that bit.
Brilliant, especially because James Masters, the guy that plays him, isn't British. So Anthony Head taught him how to do that British accent, and it's done so well that you probably wouldn't tell unless you knew.
That's an interesting story, actually. I don't think I would ever have known that. So, yeah, good knowledge. Let's move on to your third choice. Supernatural. Now, this one's very popular. We've had a few people coming along with Supernatural. It seems like a show that I need to get involved with because everybody seems to love it. For people who haven't seen Supernatural, give us a little synopsis of what it's about.
You've got two brothers. They're the Winchesters, Sam and Dean. When you first meet them, Sam's off, about to start Yale Law. And Dean comes in and is like, "Dad's gone missing on a hunting trip, And he's like, "Yeah, I don't want to come." And he's like, "No, please, come on." And then from there, they just go on wacky adventures, solving supernatural mysteries. And it's just a lot of fun. I put off watching it. I did not want to watch it. And somebody that I used to work with was like, "You'd love it. It's really, really something you would love." So I tried watching it, and I got to the third episode, and I was like, "No, I can't watch this. This is terrible." I can't do it. And I did that for about 4 times. I tried watching the first 3 episodes like 4 times over, and I just couldn't do it. And then one day it just kind of clicked for me, and I thought, actually, you know what? This isn't too bad. And then I got hooked, and now I'm a total super fan.
I don't know if it's like this for Supernatural, but there are some shows that I watch that are so good, and I want to recommend them to people, but I would almost be inclined to say skip season 1, because some shows just take that little bit extra time to find themselves. And so that's why I always try and make people persevere with TV shows, because especially in America, sometimes season 1, it's just, you're throwing a lot of spaghetti and you're trying to see what sticks. And then season 2, they kind of refine it and they have a better formula for what works.
With Supernatural, it wasn't that so much for me. I think for me, it was just the first few episodes, like I think the first episode's The White Woman. So they go to a house, and there's this, basically a banshee that kidnaps men, takes them to the house. And I was like, oh, this is really predictable. But as you get further into it, on the first season at least, it does get very good, and it gets very funny, which is what keeps you coming back. Because even if there is the bad episode, there is a few bad seasons, there's these very funny moments. They do a Scooby-Doo crossover, and they are Scooby-Doo characters, and it's really, really funny. And there is this angel guy that comes in, and he just doesn't get humans, and it's brilliant, but he becomes like one of the gang. In fact, when you first walk in my house, I've got a sign, and it's one of his best phrases for when he kicked like Lucifer back down to hell. And it's just, hey, arse butt. So when you first walk on my house, that's what you'll see. It's just a picture, and it just says, hey, arse butt.
Yeah, do all your friends, I'm guessing they know what you're into.
Some of my friends know what I'm into. They haven't watched it. I'm trying to convince one of my best friends just to sit down and watch it with me.
Yeah, I think most people I know that watch Supernatural, it's actually been a friend referral rather than people stumbling across it.
Yeah. Well, it's on its last season now, and I know that I'm going to be completely devastated when it's over. I am watching it as it's going through, but I know that I'm going to bawl my eyes out for about a week. I'm really attached to the characters in Supernatural.
When in your life did you kind of discover it? What were you up to at the time?
So I actually only discovered it about 2 years ago. It was part way through their 13th season. At the time I was home with a bubba, and I wasn't going out very much, and my toddler was very much screamy a lot, and it was kind of my escape thing. I'd just kind of go up and I'd watch it, and it helped me get through a time where I was very, very isolated, because motherhood can be quite isolating. So when I couldn't just go out and do the things that my friends were doing, it was very much, I could sit home and I could watch this, and there's a really good community around it as well online. So you can go talk about episodes and you can have a laugh, and it was just a nice little break away from normal life for me.
So you already have positive associations with this TV show, and it gives you a kind of positivity when you watch it, and it's also tried and tested as something that can help you personally get through isolation.
Oh yeah, I could sit there and watch it back to back for hours on end. It's definitely very positive for me. There isn't any negative feelings towards, like, I don't have kind of, oh, well, I don't, this kind of makes me feel bad, or there's a character that makes me want to not watch it. Every character is very well thought through, and the chemistry, especially in the actors, works very well. So whenever I watch it, I just kind of go, yeah, this is my happy place.
That's fantastic, and I really think it's important for people to have TV shows or films like that. TV and film gets the kind of bad rap sometimes of being, it used to be called the idiot box. It probably still is called the idiot box in certain circles, but I just think if TV show can help people in such moments as Supernatural did for you during that period of time, it's only a positive. And I just think everybody needs to have their kind of show that they go to, really. And this is really helping me understand associations people have with TV and film as I've been doing this kind of little bonus part of the Geekly. So that's a really positive story. Okay, let's move on to number 4.
My number 4 is The Young Ones.
I imagine everybody watching this anywhere but the UK will have no sense of what you're talking about. Give us a quick synopsis for anybody that doesn't know what this show is.
The Young Ones is possibly one of the greatest British comedies ever made. There's 5 students that live in this student house, and they go to Scumbag University. And each one is very typical of the alternative comedy subcultures at the time. So you've got the punk, you've got the hippie, you've got the cool guy. It's incredibly funny. And it has some really good musical guests on it, actually.
Who? Give us a few guests on it. Motorhead was on it, wow.
Yeah, and Madness was on it, and they did Baggy Trousers.
I can see Madness being on The Young Ones, yeah.
It was a brilliant scene as well, because at the time there was this big fight going on, and all the characters, when the musicians are playing, are carrying on their scene. So in this particular one, Vivian and Rick are currently having a fight about Rick being a virgin. So they're just running around, you know, hitting each other and stuff to like baggy trousers, and it's a brilliant scene.
Who got you into it?
I actually fell into it just on my own. I have a huge love of Rick Mail.
Yeah, I've got to be honest, I'm not well versed in the young ones, but I've seen every episode of Bottom with Rick Mail and Ade Edmondson, and they were obviously both in this.
Just a comic genius, born on the 7th of March. And he started the young ones. He actually wrote the first episode with his girlfriend at the time. And then later on, Ben Elton joined the writing staff. But Rick Mail, I think most Americans know him from Drop Dead Fred.
Yeah.
But he was just this huge comedy like character. He did this like Pete the Poet character where he'd flick the fees the wrong way round and scream about Vanessa Redgrave. And he had just this wonderful way of making people feel happy, even if he was just hitting somebody over the head with, you know, a frying pan. And he had 5 mantras to live by, which I think everybody actually should live by. He was just this wonderful man, but he died way too soon.
Yeah, Rick Mail is someone that I had absolutely like no connection with at all, but is somebody I think of very frequently. He was somebody that just every time I saw him, he was being absolutely hilarious. I used to watch Bottom like over 20 years ago with my family when I was probably way too young to really should have been watching something like that, but just an absolute genius. And there aren't many times when you hear about a celebrity passing that you kind of, you know, feel that real deep shock. But I remember feeling it when he passed away. But nobody ever has a bad word to say about him. There are so many good stories that have come out about him and his life since his passing. How does it make you feel when you kind of watch this show?
When I watch the young ones, it reminds me of, especially of being like this confused 18-year-old that I was very much like the Rick character in it, like completely against like all things wrong, like I don't like authority but I don't know why. And British university is quite a lot like that, especially when you live in these like student homes. There are funny arguments, and you know, you are just up there eating lentils and trying to nick some sugar from your like neighbour and throwing it into the fire in hopes of keeping warm. I picked the young ones though. Anything with Rick Mail in it would have done, especially things like the New Statesman or Bottom, especially the live Hooligans Island.
Yeah.
Because there's a moment in that where Rick cracks and he breaks character and he's just stood laughing and he cannot stop, and it's possibly one of the greatest things. It just brings so much joy.
Just an incredible voice as well. And I think that's kind of almost 90% of what you need in comedy, but he had everything else. Just a complete genius, top to bottom. Pun very much intended. Okay, let's move on to number 5.
Number 5 is the Mighty Boosh.
Now, I'm a huge Mighty Boosh super fan. I was thrilled when I saw this on your list. Talk to me about when and where you were when you discovered the Mighty Boosh.
So I was in college when I found the Mighty Boosh, and I was like, yeah, this is just weird enough to be my thing. It's so surreal and fun, and there's this music, and it's just like if my mind dumped out and was a TV show, that's what would happen.
That's fantastic.
College, I was very, very quiet. I was the drama geek. You know, I had my friends, and I was still very much the weird girl. When I got to uni, I was able just to kind of go, you know, I'm completely and utterly mad. I love politics. I love comedy. Come at me. But in college, I kind of hid that. I went to a college that had a lot of people that I did my GCSEs with. So I never really got over the fact that I was the girl that was called London, even though, you know, I barely lived in London. That was my nickname when I moved to the north. So I never kind of shrugged off my high school experience when I went to college.
Okay, well, let's forget all about that. Let's go on to the Boosh. How does it make you feel to watch it? And again, like, there are going to be a lot of people like, the Mighty what? Like, I just want you to do your very best to maybe come up with some kind of synopsis, even though it evolves with every season pretty much. But if you could do your best to just tell us what the Mighty Boosh is.
The Mighty Boosh is Vince Noir, the campy, lovable French prince, and Howard Moon, the slightly more geeky jazz guy with squinty eyes. And in the first season, they are part of a zoo, and then they go to a Naboo's shop, and it's very fun. It's just wacky adventures. There's Charlie, the giant bubblegum monster, and a guy called the Crack Fox, and of course Mr. Susan.
Look at them shine. Look at them shine.
Mighty Boosh, it's just so different. Every episode's its own little world.
Yeah, and how does it make you feel to watch when you watch it?
The Mighty Boosh makes me just beam ear to ear. It really is just one of those shows that you could put on no matter what mood I was in. I would still sit there and laugh.
And so you've had a bad day in the isolation, end of the world, and it's just something you just put on to just forget the world and laugh and laugh.
Yeah, in fact, the day that we went into isolation, like the UK lockdown, I had only come out of my own isolation the day before. So the day that we went into lockdown, I sat there and I played the isolation song from Mighty Boosh because I felt it was utterly appropriate.
Oh, I almost feel like we should just sing it now, but we'll spare all the listeners. And was this something you found yourself?
Yes, it was. I think I put it on like BBC Three at like 2 a.m.
Favourite episode?
I want to say Oh Greg, but I think it's the Crack Fox episode.
That's a very good episode, yeah. He's a terrifying character. Have you listened to the audio CDs?
Yes.
Good. 9 out of 10 people that are supposedly Mighty Boosh fans say no. So I'm glad.
Because they started on radio.
They did.
So...
They did, London Live. They did. I've never seen the stage show in full that they used to apparently tour around in a stage show. But yeah, I've owned those CDs for over 10 years. I make sure every supposed Boosh fan goes away and watches them. Can you crimp?
Somewhat. I can't particularly remember any now because for some reason I feel very pressured that I'm another Boosh fan.
No, you sound like a very high level Boosh fan, so I'm very thrilled with all your answers so far.
The other day I did walk down the soup aisle and I did start doing the soup crimp.
Fantastic. Yeah, favourite character?
Oh, Howard Moon.
Howard Moon.
He's like my spirit animal.
I think I'm very Howard Moon. I wish I was more Vincent Noir, but I'm definitely a Howard Moon.
I've got a stationary village.
Oh,
Well, who's your favourite character?
I'm trying to think. Is his name Rudy van der Sarzio, the guy with the huge hair?
Oh, yeah.
I love a bit of Rudy van der Sarzio. And is it Spider, his friend?
Yeah, Spider.
But I think it's difficult to look past, for favourite character and for favourite episodes, anything with Hitcher.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, to be fair, I can do the Hitcher very, very well. But I love Bob Fossil as well, especially with his little pocket cup.
Note to self, pocket cup. The little windy man.
I literally would walk around with a dictaphone, just doing a Bob Fossil all day long.
Yeah,
apparently that's weird and unusual, and I have to be normal.
Whoever's been telling you that has been telling you lies.
I'm glad that I've just met another Boosh fan, because it seems to be one of those things where not a lot of people I know have watched it. I have a few weirdos that I know that have watched it, but a lot of people that have watched it that I know don't like it because it's a bit too out there. Yeah,
I'm very much a weirdo that's watched it. And I always tell people, if you like the Boosh, to then maybe go on to Flight of the Conchords. It's very different, but it's very similar at the same time. So I'm guessing you've watched Flight of the Conchords as well.
I think I know every song off by heart.
Okay, well, favourite song from Flight of the Conchords, I've got to ask you.
Brett, You've Got It Going On.
Yeah. The one I like is Inner City Pressure. Fashion's a good song as well, but Inner City Pressure, that's the one I like. I wish I could remember the lyrics. Just spill a few now. But
as soon as I go into it, I'm like, I like that song, but I can't remember the lyrics right now. But I'll remember at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
And I'll be singing it to myself.
Okay, I think at that point we should probably move on to number 6. We'll be talking about Boosh all day long. Yeah, it talks about number 6.
Number 6 is the Rocky Horror Picture Show. When I was a kid, we had a CD that was just the audio from the film. And I remember listening to it and just being completely blown away. And then when I was a little bit older, I watched it. I thought, this is just, amazing. Who is this man dressed in stockings?
I used to love watching The Crystal Maze. I don't know about you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and Richard O'Brien There was something about him even on that TV show. I hadn't seen the Rocky Horror Picture Show at that point, but there was something about him that was just absolutely hypnotising and magnetic and just kind of otherworldly.
He's a very odd man.
He is a very odd man. Why is it, do you feel it necessary viewing to get you through the rest of your natural life in this post-apocalyptic scenario?
There is nothing about it that isn't perfect. You've got Meatloaf, a very young and attractive Meatloaf. You have Christopher Biggins dressed in like the world's worst suit. There is dancing, there is drag, and there is just enough creepiness and sci-fi and gender bending for it to be just so ahead of its time and so happy and so strange. If you hadn't noticed, I'm a very strange person.
You're in good company, so don't worry about that. Yeah, I mean, the songs are just kind of timeless, incredibly catchy. I would recommend anybody go and watch this film, but I'd also, if you're the kind that goes to the theatre, go and actually see it on stage as well.
Yeah.
It's a very amazing experience. What is your favourite song?
Sweet Transvestite.
That's a really good one. Immediately after this, I'm going to have to go and listen to that now. I won't ask you to sing if you don't want to.
I can't sing. I really, really can't sing. I do sound like a bag of drowned cats.
Well, you'll have plenty of time to learn in your crypt. And that's the one, if I'm not mistaken, that heavily features the great Tim Curry.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, he's a magnificent man. We've talked about a lot of magnificent people today, including Rick Mayall. But Tim Curry, I think of Home Alone 2, where he's just that unbearable guy working in the hotel. I think about The Wild Thornberrys. I think about Pennywise. And I think about this as well. He's pretty fucking cool.
He did a double feature for Criminal Minds, and it was actually the one thing ever that has completely freaked me out. He was so disgustingly perfect for the role. It was horrible and brilliant. It's one of my favourite films of all time. It's just such a good film. It makes me want to smile and dance, and every time my friends will even say, quote, I'm repeating everything, and if there's a song that's playing, I'll know it, and I'm up jumping around and being very, very silly.
I think it's important that we have those kind of things in our lives that just get us dancing or get us singing. Whether we can sing or dance isn't really the point, but
I know that one.
Yeah, you just gotta do something a bit crazy. Do you want to have an attempt at maybe explaining it, or I just think maybe it's something that's better left unexplained?
You can't really explain it. It has so many different things that happen in it that there is no way you could fully explain it. You'd have to sing every song to be able to explain it.
Okay, well, thank you for giving me all your choices. Let's finish off by talking about the book that you're allowed to bring in. You get a copy of Watchmen, and you get a copy of 1001 Films to Watch Before You Die. What is your third book?
Right, okay, this is really, really hard because I have a huge library. So I ended up just picking A Streetcar Named Desire, the play, obviously in book form.
Yeah, I think I've read this. We did this back at school, I think. And I remember going to the Gulbenkian Theatre on the University of Kent campus 15 years ago. And it was the very worst production of anything I've ever seen in my entire life.
When done badly, it is possibly the most hurtful thing you could watch.
Yeah, I mean,
it might actually hurt your soul.
Yeah, I mean, there's a scene in particular. We won't maybe say it, but I think you know exactly the bit I'm talking about. It was, it was the most. It was truly awkward viewing.
It can be quite painful to watch, especially with actors who aren't quite comfortable with that kind of thing.
We left and we went to the car park. It was a school trip. And we went back to the car park and we were stood there in the car park ripping this thing to shreds because obviously, we were we knew everything there was to know as teenagers. And the whole cast walked straight past us.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
That must have been awfully embarrassing.
We took it surprisingly well, but I think they didn't so much.
They gave up acting, that was it.
That was probably the final performance many of them ever gave. I would totally believe that.
So, Streetcar Named Desire is set in New Orleans. You're introduced to a couple that live there. You have Stanley and his wife. Stanley's wife comes to stay, and she's a little bit mental. She's nervous, and she has some history, and Stanley doesn't like her. Eventually, it kind of comes to a head, and she's slowly, unraveling. And there's this big horrific scene towards the end, and she completely breaks. And you get to see Stanley, this main character who has kind of dominated over the entire play, just win everything. And it's just a perfect representation of how sometimes life goes, that the bad guy does win.
Yeah, it's heavy weather. And is there any particular reason you would bring this with you, or is it just one of those things that you just love to read it?
It has very many different layers. It's not just, bad things happen, this is what it is. It's very much a way of exploring how you can deal with your own mental health. It sounds strange, but when you read it and you focus on it and you see, like, Blanche's character, the sister, when she is, talking about her previous husband being caught with a man, and an older man, and her embarrassment, and then him committing suicide. It's not just her mental health she's talking about her former husband's. And then the person she's speaking to is also dealing with something because of that. And you just have all these different layers of who's who and what makes you a person and what makes you a human in the way that we like to interact with others. Do we change just because we're talking to one person or not?
I think it's also very important about the people you surround yourself with. When I read it, I always found that. I have to drag it back to genre fiction, I apologise, but in the context of your situation that you find yourself in, barricaded into where you are, do you think that it's important to have something that can teach you lessons about self-help and about mental health? Because in this scenario that you would find yourself in, you are isolated. You do have these 9 pieces of electronic media. You've got this book. You will have your luxury item that we'll talk about in a second. But is it important to have something that's not just pure entertainment, but actually something that can instill and maybe remind you of the values and the ideas of self-care with regards to mental health?
Most definitely, because this is the thing. There is no single person on this planet that is perfect. We can strive for it all we want, but there are times that you're going to slip, and we sometimes don't recognise that is okay, that, you're allowed a bad day or a few bad days in a row or a few months in a row where you're not feeling, top of the world. There is no shame in, not doing that, and having stuff that can ground you, that can remind you that you don't have to just kind of switch off, watch something funny because you are ignoring whatever you're going through. You need to experience your pain. You need to work through who you are and how you're meant to move forward and deal with that. And it's not going to be something instant, but having something you can refer to, as in someone's really gone through this, can really help you kind of manage where you are and where you want to be.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think communication as well, not just bottling it up, but you have to kind of express it, hear it being said out of your own mouth, and then it becomes real, and then you can start to deal with it. Too many people just keep these things to themselves, which is very upsetting. And there's something that me and Lex are watching on the podcast at the moment called Dispatches from Elsewhere, and we've watched it the last couple of weeks, and we keep saying that it's a very different way that they are spreading their message. And one of the characters the other day was told by her art teacher, she was building up this huge next big decision in her life, and her art teacher told her it's okay to be wrong. And I think the to be wrong part could be switched with a lot of things. It's okay to XYZ. And I think we're entering a period during this whole isolation where a lot of people are going to come out the other end of it not okay. Even if we get a cure, even if there's a vaccine, in like a year's time, a lot of people are not going to be okay. And so people that maybe haven't had mental health issues before need to maybe do the research now so that they know how to deal with something that will be totally alien to them hopefully sooner rather than later when we all emerge from this. That was a really good choice, and I think you expressed yourself very eloquently there, and some very important things that you said as well. Finally, what is your luxury item?
It has to be coffee. It has to be. It's like literally the only thing I drink. I don't even drink water. Water's in coffee, right? So all right.
Yeah, that counts. That's hydration. In what sort of sense? This is great. Like I'm very happy to allow this. I'm happy to allow infinite coffee in this scenario. Well, how do you take your coffee? Would you want a big like machine that you press buttons? Would you want like cafetiere, infinite cafetières? I don't know what the name of the little things are that you...
The disgraceful not coffee things, yeah.
Yeah.
No.
How do you like your coffee?
I'm all right, love. No, I have both a cafetiere and I have a coffee machine. I drink a lot of coffee though, so be prepared for the cost because it's a lot.
That's okay. You might be the last person on earth, so you know you have all the money.
Otherwise, I'm not going to last very long. I can promise you that. But I take my coffee literally like tar. No sugar. Just give me, I eat the beans. Like, that's how addicted to caffeine I am. It's actually quite a problem now.
Well, you'll be all alone in your little isolation and nobody can judge you in there. So go for it. Eat all the beans that you want.
Thank God. My best friend, actually, he's quite worried, thinking that if I actually stop drinking coffee, there probably would be, medical issues with that.
Withdrawal symptoms.
Oh, no, far more than that. He thinks that's actually what's keeping me going.
Oh, he thinks there's blood in your coffee system rather than coffee in your blood system.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll call it there. Chantelle of Lady Justice, a true crime podcast. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Everybody out in the world, wash your hands, stay safe, and we'll be back soon with another Podcastaway.